Hello everyone and welcome to your horoscope for the week of May the 29th and June the 4th, 2023. We have a really intense sky at play, but in a certain way we're already used to the intensity due to the still ongoing fixed grand cross, where truly it is the T-square of Mars, Jupiter and Pluto that is really triggering energies. But of course, it might get a little bit more intense because certain more minor celestial conversations are going to sprinkle it with a touch of emotional intensity, which may arise from the past or from the depth of our soul, from the depth of our unconscious, perhaps. But of course, there is a lot of positive energy, a lot of coping, a lot of, good ideas that can come to our help, that can come to lend us at least an improvising solution to cope with the energies of this week. And of course, we are going to be closing the week with a Sagittarian full moon that can be quite optimistic, that can actually take us quite far, yet even that is not necessarily the easiest or the most, simple of energies. So let's get into the more important aspect, where it is Venus at the very beginning of the week, which holds a sextile with Uranus. So this comes as, motivation. This comes as support. This comes as, in a way, moral or emotional or spiritual or any kind of help from family, from even our local community, why not, where we belong, Cancer, from parents, from very good friends, from family, etc. But this energy can play out in a different way as well, where life might throw at us very pleasant, delightful surprises. May it be a gesture, may it be a kind word from a total stranger, may it be humorous or inspirational or certain kind of coincidence and synchronicities, randomness, which does delight us, which does give us, the sensation that we're actually not as alone as we might be feeling otherwise. Now, of course, this energy with Uranus being in Venus's sign of Taurus and Venus herself being very comfortable in the sign of Cancer, this can also represent financial help, financial solutions, or at least hope or promises or surprises, which can really go a long way, even if it's just, a minor gesture, a minor sum, a minor solution to a financial problem that we may have. Now, also Venus later on is going to perfect her trine with Neptune, and this is quite a important and deeply spiritual water trine, because Neptune can represent the divine source. Also from within us, naturally, it can also represent the most benevolent and beneficial energies that our own unconscious may produce. Because of course the realm of the unconscious is usually dark. It is usually heavy. A lot of, as I said, heaviness is stored there, but no one says it cannot have something pleasant, something good. As I said, there is such a thing as, primal urges which do fight with our consciousness to come to the surface, but there is also a primal benevolence which can do the same thing. Let me just give you an example. The instinct to help another person, which is not just specific to humankind. Just watch, on social media, where dogs rescue other animals, ducklings or whatever. So even the world of animals can be full of good deeds, which, to us, to our modern scientific perspective is almost miraculous, but really it's not, because nature herself has benevolence written deeply within her, not just the, what we're familiar with, predator and prey, the cruelty and all of that. Now, this can represent powerful soul healing moments, but of course, there is a other dichotomous energy parallel to it, which might trigger it and activate it. But before I get to this, this Venus and Neptune trine is a really, really good energy for artists, for healers, for, dreams, for fantasy, for inner inspiration, inner peace, inner quiet. Why not even romantic energy? Because Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, and it rules the sign of Pisces. So both of these planets are very, very comfortable where they are. So their harmonious dance can produce something that genuinely feels like a blessing. And that blessing may not really come from, let's say, the material or human sphere, but much higher than that. And when we do feel, when we do perceive that the universe itself, reality itself, our own unconscious, perhaps even the unconscious of other people, or collectively speaking, is kind to us, it is helpful, it is, beneficial, it wants to motivate us, to inspire us, to give us hope, to give us love, to deliver a message that only through the heart and our spirits can we decipher it. Well, that gives us a certain kind of power. Now, of course, astrology is best understood through examples, exemplified. And this trine, even though at the beginning of the week, and right now when I'm recording this, it's, Sunday, so it's not even next week, but it's in a smaller degree still operational. It played out in my life, and in such a suggestive way to the astrology. First Neptune in the sign of Pisces. Well, yes, the divine source, of course, but it's also fantasy, it's also illusion, and it's also escapism, substances, altered state of consciousness. Venus in the sign of Cancer is the delight of it. It is basically, like, let me give you the best example, like the muses, the divine graces that shower us with inspiration, happiness, love and joy and all that. So going back to my example, so I was having a walk, and usually when I walk, it's like meditative and stuff like that, but it was late at night, and I had a hoodie on, so basically I was enveloped by the shadows. And randomly, a really, really drunk guy just insisted that he wants to take a selfie with me for absolutely no real reason. And I said, oh, well, why not? And after then, I kind of thought, well, why did this surprise ultimately happen to me? And I kind of realized that, well, no one said that, the person's altered state of consciousness, the drunkenness, has to bring out toxicity and all the bad. Sometimes it brings out the more, or better said, most loving part of a person, where, the unconscious can absolutely be filled with love. And the effect that it had on me, well, you can imagine that in that moment, I existed for that person, but not for his ego, because I think the ego was very much asleep. Neither for the mental sphere, because he couldn't even have a good sense of direction when walking, but it was actually for the unconscious, for the soul, and it was for no reason. That means it's divine. So that person made me feel really nice, made me feel that I exist. And, it was a really, really pleasant surprise, but delivered in a really Neptunian way. No, but of course, this is just an example. Inspiration, love, divine help, divine encouragement can come from the most unexpected places. And naturally, going back to the Venus sextile Uranus, it is exactly what this says as well. Sometimes life is actually full of the most pleasant surprises, but we need to be open to it. We truly need to embrace it. Now, of course, let's get to a little bit of heaviness, because the sun in the sign of a Gemini, especially at the beginning of the week, does hold a conversation of tension with Saturn in the sign of Pisces. Now, this is not an easy energy because the sun in Gemini is ultimately optimistic. It is like the adolescent. It wants to be full of hope, wants to, when I say believe, in a more mental way, if you know what I mean. That, yeah, things are gonna be okay, I'm gonna make it okay, I have friends, I have connections, there is a lot. Gemini, the duality. Things might be bad here, there, in this area of life, in that area of life, but there is also a lot of good in, other places. But Saturn may come with a reality check, and it is in from the domain of Pisces, if you know what I mean. So Pisces can tell us, well, optimism and all that, but we do have duties, we do have obligations, and a deep soul level obligation that certain things need to be taken very, very seriously. And that doesn't go very well with the Gemini sun, because the Gemini sun's seriousness is exactly its lightheartedness, its playfulness. So Saturn may disillusion. Saturn may bring a certain touch of cruelty, certain touch of heaviness. But of course, this is actually, believe it or not, beneficial, because under this T square, we do need to be quite serious in, many different ways in our lives. But at the same time, perhaps the strongest seriousness that our mental sphere, our mental optimism, the inner adolescence, the lightheartedness of the Gemini sun cannot really compensate for the divine heaviness, for karma, karmic obligations, karmic duties. For example, family karma. It can, life can go the most wonderful and fantastic way for you, not for you, not as in directed to you, but for a person in this moment. But their parents or someone can have a lot of problems, can have a lot of heaviness in their life. So this is where our own happiness, our own optimism, our own lightheartedness might be, eclipsed, might be drowned, we might receive a very strong slap. And this might even bring a certain touch of guilt, as in, can I truly feel the lightheartedness and happiness for everything that I have in my life when people very, very dear to me are going through hardship, for example? This can also represent where Saturn and Pisces are just pure principles. Whatever I have in my life, it's nice and it works and I should be happy, but it did go against my principles. What compromises did I make? Or how did I get to this happy state? And naturally, this energy goes strongly against escapism. This is where substances, games, books, novels, fantasy, even spiritual bypassing is not gonna be all that helpful. It is not gonna get us out of, the reality check. And as I said, this is not really a more rational and concrete reality check, but more like a karmic, deep soul level one, where it is the divine that comes with its own reality, with the divine reality. And that is not all that easy to bear. Now, at the same time, and this towards the end of the week, we also have a different kind of reality check where Uranus conjunct Mercury. These two planets are also each other's octave. Mercury the lower and Uranus the higher. So the reality check, so to speak, is gonna be rewarded because it comes with epiphany, it comes with realization, it comes with mental fortitude where we just know what our truth is. Uranus is ultimately the planet of awareness. And, Uranus does bring chaos with it, but when Mercury is strongly aligned, that chaos is understood, it is accepted, and ultimately we are turning it into solutions. We quickly, under this, Uranian, mental Uranian energy, we disregard or we eliminate, all the inconveniences, and we truly use in a flash of an eye, almost through instinct, everything good that spontaneously or through our awareness, us being aware and seizing the opportunity, so we use it towards our advantage. Now, another energy that is staying with us still is Jupiter conjunct the North Node, but of course, this is part of the T square. But Jupiter's conjunction with the North Node is getting, especially at the beginning of the week, very, very tight. So that means it expanded. We really need to advance. We really need to get there. We really need to be living whatever it is that we are basically working towards. Now, this Jupiter might not come with action for everyone. For some people, absolutely. This is where don't even dream about your comfort zone, going back into it, because you can't. While for other people, especially those who are very, very energetic initiators and do, take action very, very quickly and intensely, for them it might represent the need to wait, the need to be patient, or, this Pluto is retrograding back into Capricorn. So we're waiting on institutions, we're waiting on third party members, we're waiting on, everything that really comes from the collective, and it doesn't depend on us. For example, when an authority, when a organ of the state or something local like a council or administration, or why not Capricorn, job wise, a director, a board meeting, or all these things, they have to come up with a decision, with something, and the waiting and it will boil within us ultimately like a deep frustration. That might be very, very heavy for us to keep our cool, for us to exactly use the best of the Uranus and Mercury conjunction. Because that can also be like quick words, that can be like very, very eruptive. That can be like, I had it with the waiting, I had it with the universe even, I had it with my surrender moment, I'm taking it into my own hands, sorry, but that will just be self-sabotaging, if you know what I mean. So for some people, this represents really staying outside of the comfort zone and continuing to work, while for others, the patience. Like always, this T-square, or better said, the fixed grand cross, because there will be a moment around the 1st of June when the moon will perfect the T-square, actually, because it will meet the south node. So the moon is not just a fictional energy, it is, a physical planet. So on the 1st of June, we might be feeling this strongly emotionally, but it can get us to a certain direction. For those people who are challenged to be patient and to, embody their wisdom and, for example, take as much time to make the right decision, for them it can come as a vision that, yeah, it's worth it. Yeah, I waited so far, and I can still wait a little bit because it's working. I'm getting there. I'm starting to feel more secure from within, for example. While for others, the opposite, this is where there's promises, or maybe intuitive feelings, or maybe it comes from the past. it worked out, I don't know, 18 years ago, 9 years ago, in a certain way, and it's definitely gonna work out this time as well because I'm feeling it. So this might not necessarily be a bad energy, even though it can, add a lot of emotional intensity. And moons with South Node in Scorpio, toxicity as well. But as I said, toxicity has to come out from us one way or another. And this week it's gonna be toxic from a totally different perspective as well. But before I get to that, the 1st of June, where I live, and in this part of Europe, is International Children's Day, and such a beautiful coincidence with the sun being in the sign of Gemini, truly embracing the childlike spirit. And it's not just the sun in Gemini, it is Mars in the sign of Leo, the sign of children, the sign of the inner child, the sign of creativity. So happy Children's Day to absolutely everyone. May you be a real child or just a big inner child. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to wish a friend of mine, Peter, a very, very happy birthday solar return. But of course, now let's get to a different kind of heaviness and toxicity, which is more like karmic. This is a minor astrological conversation, a minor aspect, but it can come as salt on wounds, really, because Saturn in the sign of Pisces is the past. And as I said, the unconscious and everything is stored within. And Saturn can also represent memories, because time. Saturn is basically Chronos, the lord of time, and inner time basically means when we go back in time through memories, through, recollecting what happened to us. Now, Pisces is ultimately the sign of forgiveness, the sign of, releasing or alchemizing heavy feelings into understanding, into a Christ consciousness. Here thereby, balancing out and closing karma and preventing certain bad patterns from running. But of course, there are certain moments when we may have forgiven, but we just cannot forget because the memory comes back in a haunting and rather aggressive way. And this is where it does hold a quincunx, and in conjunction with Mars in the sign of Leo, something triggers our hearts of hearts, the memory of what happened. And this energy won't be very, very easy. For example, in partnerships where partners, of course, they wronged each other at a moment. Of course, there was forgiveness and understanding and healing and group therapy and all of that. So the energies might be very, very serene and mutually, accepted. Everything is okay. But there can come a moment, in conjunction again, when something triggers it and it erupts. And it can be heavy toxicity moment, but it doesn't last for a long time, and sometimes we may feel powerless. Powerless because the heart just erupts, because ultimately feelings are also one's own truth. And the truth is basically not going anywhere. Hence, Mars squaring Jupiter as well, the truth. So sometimes it needs to be said, but this doesn't mean that the forgiveness is not there simultaneously. It might not really make sense to us rationally because, well, if I have forgiven, then why do I feel this way? Why does this emotion erupt from me? Why does my heart feel like a volcano or geyser? Well, this is where it's also karmic. There is a divine part in us as well. And sometimes this is how karma plays out. Not physically. No, this is where karma doesn't bite. And with a quincunx, both sides, not just one person, everyone involved. Karma doesn't bite physically, but it can bite emotionally. And there might be absolutely nothing we can do about it. Just observe and reflect and, process the guilt or whatever feelings it might trigger. Now, if this wasn't enough, in astrology, there are so very many types of astrology, first of all. And some energies are not physical, they aren't even real. This is where there are certain fictional planets, fictional energies, or in other words, esoteric ones, which basically are just real in the ether, yet they're very, very real when it comes to emotions, when it comes to karma, when it comes to, inner alchemy. Sometimes the esoteric planets are more real than the real planets, if that even makes sense. And where I'm going with this is Volcanus, the esoteric or fictional ruler of Taurus, is in the sign of Leo. So you can imagine that's where our hearts are like a volcano. If triggered, well, it will burst out, it will erupt. This is where, especially from an esoteric perspective, it is not exactly Aries, Leo, Scorpio, or the sign which you would expect to be the most violent one, but rather it's Taurus. Exactly because it is, let's say, ruled by Volcanus. When Taurus erupts, well, no stone is left unturned in a true and, real way. So this week might have this energy involved as well. But there is also something really, really positive to compensate. And this is where the asteroid Vesta, goddess of the sacred flame, the protector of the heart, the protector of emotions, the protector of basically the love within us, is also conjunct Uranus. So this is where the volcanic eruption from the heart can also play out in an opposite way simultaneously, of course, in a different pretext, in a different way, in a different circumstance, but there is also a positive eruption here. Vesta speaks to me about like hero energy. Everything you think it's lost, emotionally or in any way depending on your specific situation, and then someone comes along, something happens, and surprise, surprise, you feel safe, you feel loved, you feel, the most elevated expression of Vesta, where there is an inner fire burning within you, and it protects you, and it gives you light, even in darkness, inner light. And going back to Saturn in the sign of Pisces, it doesn't matter if the sun doesn't shine at the very depth of the ocean, because there's still light there. There's bioluminescence. There is warmth. And, the depth is that much closer to the crust of the earth. So it's magnetic powers, which in a way, that's also fire energy. It's there. More there than in any other place. So there is a lot of good in the sky as well. And needless to say that the week is closed by a very powerful full moon in the sign of Sagittarius. A full moon which is trined by Lilith, Black Moon Lilith in Leo. Now, of course, Black Moon Lilith in Leo in its worst expression is the toxicity of the heart. Hatred, or, hatred is love, really. Another spectrum of love. Anger, deep frustration, intolerance, a moment of rage, moment of outlash, moment of deep violence. That is also a certain expression of the inner fire of love. So, but of course, Black Moon Lilith is here. It's not a new energy. We are used to this. But with Mars and Volcanus, of course, active, and Venus starting her, you know, transit in Leo. She's not, next week she's not in Leo yet, but she's in Anaretic Cancer. So Anaretic Cancer is even worse than Leo, to be totally honest, because that is where the best example of toxicity lies. But where I want to go with this is that Lilith trining that full moon in Sag, that is where whatever anger, whatever outburst, whatever triggered this, well, ultimately will drive us one way or another to elevate from it, to rise above it, to leave it behind, to, burn it out. Why not? To consume it, to, how should I even say? To, when you need to burn something and that is not really being consumed by the flames, well, you turn up the heat to the maximum until the heat tolerance simply cannot withstand anymore. And, in that sense, even the toughest metal turns to, and I don't want to make a scientific error here, I do believe it's vaporized, atomized, or whatever. Or on a different perspective, diamond can burn, just like coal. So it does burn away, it is consumed a fire trine. But of course, even that energy isn't all that very easy, because this full moon does hold a square with planetoid Orcus in the sign of Virgo. So we do it. So basically, it's truth based. It's truth oriented. This is where, however, we rise above the heavy feelings, and as I said, I repeat, the volcanic eruption. We cannot do it with fantasy. We cannot do it with lying to ourselves. We cannot do it by basically drowning our anger. We do need to burn it out with truth, with inner truth, with practical truth. This is also a reality check. But it does save the day. And, it does prepare us how to cope with the final moments of this T-square. And ultimately, Pluto slowly and surely is exiting, retrograding out, in that sense, the sign of Aquarius, starting to touch Capricorn. So that makes things serious in a collective way. That means that it is only now that these very turbulent energies are gonna reflect collectively, but in a real sense, because Capricorn is the stage of manifestation. When a planet reaches that part of the sky, that's when it gets real. That's when it's dished out. For example, usually when Mars reaches, because Mars approximately every 2 years gets into Capricorn. But when it does, that's when whatever Mars did is gonna get serious in that period of time. And also, we must not forget about another planetoid that is making a very, very special preparation. Sedna is starting to reach the final degrees and final minutes of the sign of Taurus. So that makes it extremely heavy, because it will enter Gemini briefly and then retrograde out. But in June it will enter Gemini. And in a way that's good, because every energy has a positive and negative side. Good in the sense that our minds are, serious. Are serious to get things done. And Sedna is extremely good at elimination. This is where whatever is mentally holding us back, may it be even the most rigid mental pattern, misaligned, and I don't want to say belief, but rather mental programming, what was deeply taught by force sometimes to our mental sphere, now it might not have any power over us. We might understand or understand the necessity to rise above it or to go against it. And like for example, and I also have to use my personal example because I do have my Chiron, my natal Chiron in Gemini. So when I was, in, how should I say this, middle school, or after kindergarten, primary school, that's it. Well, I had an extremely communist, and I'm so sorry, but a B-word, a really tough B-word teacher who was not a B, in a physical sense, but she was so discriminatory and manipulative. She discriminated based on how rich the families of the children were. If you were poor, well, it didn't matter how good you were, how smart you were, what kind of talent you brought to the table, because you didn't exist. You really, really didn't exist. And that left like a horrible, at least on me, trauma, mental trauma. This is where it, and this is where I could not, and I still can't control it, because my mind is programmed this way permanently that, sorry, it seems like certain, this is Mercury basically driving some people crazy with their motorbikes. Anyway, so my mind thinks permanently, it doesn't matter what I speak, what I express, what my plans are, because I'm poor, it will never ever, nothing will ever come of it. And it's fake. It's life proved to me the opposite. But it can't. Because this is where, when you program something in a software, you do need to get into it and delete it manually, because otherwise it cannot change. This is what Sedna does. It empowers us to even change the impossible programs. And this was just my personal example, but many people have this. And another example, some people are addicted to social media. Some people think that real life is on Instagram, Facebook, etc. And what they share there, that's real to them. That's what makes them exist. And that is profoundly wrong. Or not, maybe not wrong to them, but incompatible with life. You know what I mean? It's truly incompatible with physical life. Because they will get seriously ill after, let's say, 10 years of living like that. Sedna comes to the rescue. Sedna will give us the strength to go against this programming. However, the negative expression of that is where our mental sphere go into a state of, and I'm trying to use the best word here because Sedna's example, rebellion, but a bitter rebellion. Sedna's legend, this is where her father wanted her to marry, an arranged marriage of course. She refused, according to some legends, and as a gesture of spite, she married a dog. Her father went insane and sentenced her to death, to be thrown into the oceans. And when Sedna was thrown, she clung on to the boat, and her fingers had to be cut off for her to sink and drown. And her fingers, of course, turned into sea creatures and all of that, but Sedna became, well, according to some legends, the benevolent goddess of the deep sea, according to other legends, the mother of all sea monsters, who drowns everyone who gets into her way, who dares to go to the bottom of the ocean. Sedna's symbolism sometimes is when seaweed chokes you. Sedna's other symbolism is the dark mermaid energy, where some deep sea divers go insane and they just give themselves to the ocean. They just cannot, something touches their soul in the sea when diving. Of course, not there and then. After a period, in their sleep, they're haunted. They have no rest and they just go into the sea and never, ever, ever, ever return. That is Sedna, the darkest magic of the sea. The darkest magic and the sea is the unconscious, where the mind is mental sphere is possessed by the unconscious and it torments us. It drives us into a certain kind of mental depression, but there is, of course, a positive side, even in the negative. Why? For us to understand what torments us and why and how to eliminate it. But of course, this is a different folder, a different chapter, a different story, a different horoscope, but not all that, far in the future, because Sedna does change signs in June. And as she's changing signs, she will hold a conversation with Pluto. So these two planets together are very, very intense, because Pluto is ultimately the planet of power, giving Sedna more power than she already has. This is where Sedna's energy, because Sedna herself will never ever rise up from the bottom of the ocean, because in spite, in defiance. But her energy, her influence, her dark mermaid sung well. Pluto empowering it. What will that say collectively? What does social media does to the collective? So Gemini will be deeply triggered by this energy. Not people born under the sign of Gemini. Not Gemini sons purely collectively. Gemini rules communication, media, travels, what is shared as information, and also the internet, everything that is stored on the internet. The darkest secrets and the dark web is going to be spilled out, exposed. And this will cause certain effects, certain changes, and Pluto, well, as soon as Sedna and Pluto meet, Pluto will go back, or will be back in Capricorn, and that kind of means restrictions or heavy punishment on the internet. So in some parts of the world it will be, how should I say, censored, or even banned, even forbidden, or taken 100,000,000% under the control of authorities, while in other parts of the world it will have a deadly freedom by law, by court ruling, etc., etc., but truly a deadly freedom where the dark web is there for everyone to access. But again, this is a different chapter, but Sedna is setting the stage for this already. And because Jupiter is conjunct the North Node and aggressed by Pluto, the the courts of justice and the legal system is also preparing this, as I said, in some parts as a total control and restriction, in other parts as deadly liberty. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for all the love, all the support, all the generosity, and I do hope that this was helpful. And until next time, bye for now.